you. I would like to thank you for the invitation. Mm, I would like to give a quite different presentation as compared to the previous ones and offer an assessment also of definitions and framework plus some data. So the other two presentations were very focused on data. Also because data can be many concerning technological dependencies and also from very different perspectives. So it is there is always the risk of getting lost in data and maybe missing to assess the meaning, deep meaning of a dependency. So my presentation start from these definitions of technological dependency and the related concepts, pass through the EU legal perspective, so how to protect sovereignty in EU, then different ways to assess the technological dependency, also with a focus on R&D spending of top firms, and then shortly some conclusions and policy. What do we mean with the technological dependency? So, to me, it's not simply a matter of a definition, a unique definition. It's also because there are several interrelated definitions that we find. Some were mentioned for strategic sectors, strategic dependence or strategic autonomy, technological dependency indeed, technological sovereignty, digital sovereignty, and so on. So my starting point is this sometimes, especially over the very last years, last 2-3 years, an excess of geopolitical emphasis. But there are many contradictions. Dario was mentioning one before, that, for instance, some large German car makers are not so interested in limiting imports from China connected to batteries and so on. So the viewpoint that I try to assess start from the idea that a simplistic subjective perspective can be limited. So if we start from the nation states point of view, can be limited. We first have to move to an objective perspective. So which are the relevant technologies that create dependencies? How can we identify them? So this is the first point. And then go back to a new subjective that in my perspective, at least, is a private firm level perspective. So which are the actors that are creating or directing such a dependency? Where are they coming from? And then eventually going back to the national or supranational basis. As I said, definitions. Sometimes they in abstract words, indeed they are not, but there are many definitions. For instance, looking at technological sovereignty back also in time. So the idea is that look at specific technological and scientific knowledge. We think about the capabilities that firms or maybe also research organizations have to develop strategic advantages, and to what extent they refer to countries. So the last one, European Parliament thing, here we have a strategic autonomy as a definition, refers to the capacity of the EU to act autonomously without being dependent on other countries in strategically important areas. As we have seen before, is wishful thinking because we are dependent on other countries. So, okay, we can say these definitions, but it's not giving us a solution. Indeed, reality is a matter of funding, in particular EU. So we can think about last year, Ursula von der Leyen sentence that the concept of sovereignty fund, we were talking about EU sovereignty, European sovereignty fund. We need a European structural response on how to address and support the key technologies. No country, no EU member state is an island. Sean Dunn's centuries ago. The beginning, there was amount of money that were requested this fund coming from top EU national countries. So no EU member state is an island, but in the end, that was a small archipelago representation, so very few countries. But then this idea of this type of fund was rejected in Germany and Netherlands and also other countries. And then we have now these strategic technologies for Europe platform that is more modest approach. The result is what we have in the EU since ever. So 27 small policy designs that try to be combined together, but usually that put EU at risk of strategic or calling another relevant for this premise. In fact, in this paper, again, it's science paper and on nice independence, still there is an overemphasis on the geopolitical country level exchange. They say globalization has transformed the liberal order by moving the action away from multilateral institutions and toward networks of private actors. In my view, knowing a bit of capitalist history over the last centuries, it has always been relation among private actors. And of course, there are states. So be careful not to overemphasize the country level approach. If you look at other reports, I think about 2002 US report, the mid-decade challenges to national competitiveness, and a special competitive studies project, a private foundation, Eric Schmidt from CEO. There is a very limited mentioning of the European Union. So the US think tanks that thinks that there is a strategic competition between United States, China, not EU. The epicenter of the competition is the quest for leadership and dominant market share in the constellation of emerging technologies and so on. And the EU should leverage its leadership across the Quad, the AUKUS, and the US-EU Trade and Technology Council and bring together allies from the Americas, Europe, and Indo-Pacific. So, in few words, saying reality, there is a competition between US and China, and our in English, our friends or level friends, I don't know how to say, all around the world have to support us. So what has European Union done over the last years? Looking for the legal perspective. Instead of going towards the renovated logical idealistic accumulation, trying to stop outside subject that is US and the other side China, through also know about the recent actions against the big tech firms, use of golden power, and try and limit relevance of these firms using maybe antitrust or other legal perspectives. But again, there is a fragmentation within EU countries. Example was the US giant Intel that had to decide where to open new factories for the microchip sector in Germany, France, Italy, and also other countries. So started a clash between EU countries in order to attract. And these tools, overall, we have to remind an attempt to reply to the US IRA Why with less strength? Because who is really dependent on foreign technology. For instance, give an example, is of the Italian public administration cloud. So there was a call to create a national cloud for Italian public administrations, were all European contenders, but technologies were spaced. Okay, we can pretend that national cloud is controlled in legal formal terms by national or European thoughts, but if they rely on foreign technologies, then this is a way of it. So, I mean, I go fast here. What has been done, legal approach, is accelerating process of creating European directives and regulation, and yes, directive, Cybersecurity Act, Digital Service Act, Data Governance Act, Artificial Intelligence Act, in order to limit the independence of the governments. In principle, such a control should be Europe to preserve and avoid digital colonization. The point is really enough. To me, we must first move to more objective. So, as I said before, there are many types of approaches to define what technological dependence mean. First type of strategy, we predefine a set of critical technologies. I mean, similar to what has been done in the previous presentations. So we predefine, this is, okay, for critical raw materials, there is an official list, but conceptually, we first define the critical technologies. This is very difficult to do because the same word technology, no limits. What does technology mean? Technology is a social relations. It's everything is the relation between and labor. But even if we have managed to even list, this is a very well done site, the Critical Technology Tracker Australian website, who is leading the critical technology race. Then you take this country and against another country, you select a list of technology and you see who is winning and who is losing. First type of technological based approach. Then there might be an policy-oriented operationalization. So, for instance, this is based on a Swiss project I was partially involved in, connecting to the Swiss investment screen. So what we want to identify is potentially risky investment by China, Arab states, or so whatever, trying to enter in Switzerland with an hostile merger and acquisition in order to access technology, and again after listing the sector. So the objective process is first listing what, and I mean, you can read here. I cannot read. The report was in German, so I put this for you yourselves. You list the strategic sectors and say, okay, here we have to golden power limit for investment, but not always, because in some cases, also in that sector, I mean, it's written here, but I tell you some of the project, in some maybe subsectors that are connected to key areas, still we want to attract foreign investment. So the operationalization is, yes, again, key sectors, but in order to have policy-oriented. Then more research-oriented operationalization. To write a paper, I'm citing Dario also, so can reply to your questions after this. But in some cases, for instance, colleagues working on this, a research-oriented operationalization typically looks at two broad areas: innovation and trade. Dependency says, if you look at the trade flows and innovation measure, let's have a look how they are showing that the country is more dependent on, for instance, Chinese activities and another one. But again, from Dario and colleagues, there is a more comprehensive approach that I'm using now in slides, exactly because it's more comprehensive. So they identify the EU technological dependency, vulnerability, structural vulnerability, considering several levels. There are some demand side aspects, shown export dependency, the content of exports, the role of specific countries such as the US and China, and supply side measures. They look at corporate dependencies, for instance, indexes, participation, value chains, and then again focus on technology, so patent data as in the paper, and on critical raw materials, in combining all the possible. They identify four drivers of Europe's structural vulnerability. Of course, Germany, the most relevant country, German-centered export-led growth model that has taken a big focus on cost reduction, so sure wage modulation, and also less public investment, public investment in innovation, especially with innovative public approach, and also consequent lower innovation efforts, and then the issue expansion. These are all connected. The model that Germany has over the last years. Then an internal demand repression for all the demand pool effects and advantages of pushing the internal demand, and also this has brought lower inflation, a series of fallacious economic policy setup, framework and of interventions against state aid, and then again the other relevant factor to this. In terms of policy suggestion, work that is soon the new agenda based on three pillars: diversification of sources of supply, encouraging public investment. I mean, all these new industrial policies that we are talking today, and I will work on this afterwards. Abandoning horizontal approach to industrial policy. Also, this has been declared a lot, but not necessarily so. At the EU level, we say we need more selective industrial policies. Then it is not true that we are really going in. And of course, the other suggestion, we only go on allocating resources for infrastructures and fiscal incentives for firms, then there is again the risk of increasing, not decreasing the import. And then, I said, there are not enough resources allocated, for instance, as compared to what been done over the very last years by US on the one side and but At this point, I want to go to the last point of view that I tried to still also these papers that I said a lot focus on the country level perspective. So at a certain point, we should remember that saying US or China means saying for US firms, Chinese firms. At least this is what I believe. So there is, of course, usefulness of using national data, but also some limitation. For instance, we have a comparison the GERD versus R&D funded by government. So total R&D investment, US, Germany, China, and then the spending by government. We have this type of this. So of course, United States and Germany spend more for R&D than China. China is catching up. Okay, this seems to be logic, but also not so worrying. But then we need to go to other types of uh, if we move to the most relevant data source for R&D spending, level this R&D scoreboard published years by Commission JRC, there is this ranking firms that are the top world R&D spenders. I give you two slides. The first one is looking at the very first year. So first year of publication was 2004, the reference year R&D spending in 2003, and list of firms, basically almost 60% were US and Chinese were few, maximum 59%, and the maximum in China was 2009, 1%. If you think about the share of R&D spending by firms located or coming from headquarters located in these countries, in US was 59%, and again China 2%. So China was very limited both on the presence, the number, total number of non-EU firms active in R&D on the global. Then we jump to period from 2013 to 2021, almost the end. The year didn't add. What we have is that China is increasing a lot in terms of number of firms that are acting as top R&D standards. The US is maintaining its position in the share. The rest of the world is decreasing, but in particular, the EU decreasing. So if you look at the first year, time span, 2013, we had more than 600 EU corporations, nations in R&D all over the world. That was the 25% of the world total in the first year, and 42% of rest of the world. If you go to the last year in my span here, we have almost the half, not really the half, slightly more, 361 EU firms that now are only the 14% of world total and the 36% of the world, and they are R&D expanding. So I took the same top firms here and look at the R&D spending in the first year, time span. They were spending in 2013 155 billion euros in R&D. Now is in the last year is 192. So what we have is that US firms keep their advantage. China increases a lot. The EU decreases in terms of firms in the list, and also their increase of R&D spending is needed. And maybe I'm a bit late. Yeah, you're right. These are the last available year data. I would like to show you just this one. This is in the R&D scoreboard 2016 to 2022. R&D firms go in most relevant sectors. In both years, two sectors were most relevant: car makers, of course, and pharma. And they are still with different shares, same at the end of the period. And the third one is low percent. So two those defined, we can discuss how to define them, concentrated the large majority of R&D spending. Please look at China. In 2016, it was concentrated indeed, so similar, two main, of course, different sectors: technological, hardware, the construction. But again, the first two, only two sectors are above the 10%. If you look at the last year, we have now basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 R&D sectors. So not only an increase in R&D spending, but also spread across more sectors. We can talk about these definitions of the scoreboard, just to give you an. And of course, the EU is also less and less active in ICT sectors, hardware, software, electronics. So in the end, conclusions and policy proposals. What is technological dependency? I said a lot. So look at large firms' strategic decision making, and only afterwards look at the decision of governments, because to us there is always a mutual relationship in the private and big sector. In practice, what we suggest to do, as said also by other colleagues, push the selective industrial policy strategy. We reduce the support to larger firms. They show that they still do a lot of R&D, they earn money, though less than others. Maybe directing these selective industrial policies towards SMEs with a higher technological potential. This is something that in the European Union already happens, but not so clearly. For instance, identify the key sectors and the key SMEs with us speaking, but last but not least, involving citizens and workers in more democratic, less technocratic decision.